Well, how's everyone doing today? This is Bob Gums bringing you the Concern Forum. We got a lot going on, so let's get with it. First of all, that thing out in Hawaii, that is a real example of this climate change and the way it seems that the wind apparently it just ate up that whole island because they've already found over 100 bodies, and that's sad. That is sad. The president and his wife, I believe they'll be out there sometime before next Thursday. Of course, you don't give exact dates when the president is traveling for security reasons. Now, our least favorite subject, Donald Trump. This guy, it's just amazing to me. But besides the fact that we have a president that is literally, a former president, ex-president, I should say, that is out on bail, we have to keep in mind that it is astounding and it's not astounding. We have had a similar situation happen before in the history of our country. I know Americans, are, generally speaking, we are very poor students of history. That's one of the reasons why we get in so much trouble at different places and going into different places for the wrong things. But check it out. Are you familiar with a person named Aaron Burr, another New Yorker? This guy was Thomas Jefferson. Now, remember, Jefferson, besides the Declaration of Independence and all other good stuff, I believe he was also our first Secretary of State. And he was our third president. Now, what a lot of folks don't know is that the way that we selected our presidents back then are quite different from the way that we do it now. And the way it was all set up, because remember, Jefferson and Burr, they were supposed to be the Democratic Republican Party. That's what they called themselves back then. And the other guys, which were basically John Adams, who was our second president, they were the Federalist people, right? And it was set up so that Jefferson would be president and Aaron Burr would be vice president. And I tell you, there was some devil in old Aaron because he decided that he was going to be slick. Because at first, I think it was like a tie vote. And the next thing you know, everybody's looking and saying, well, damn, it's some kind of tie. So we have to take it to the Congress, to the House of Representatives. Burr decided to jump in, and instead of him, making sure that his spot as vice president was secure, he decides he's going to try and bump over old TJ, and that he was going to, take the presidential slot. And it was a big mess. And essentially what happened, the head Federalist at the time was Alexander Hamilton. And his Federalist buddies were saying, yeah, we got them screwed now because all we have to do, we can go ahead and we can throw our votes, influence, what have you, to Aaron Burr. And that way we knock off Jefferson from getting in the White House. Show you how patriotism works. Aaron Burr, he had kind of a reputation like Trump. In other words, couldn't be trusted. He was a little bit too slick for his own good. And so lo and behold, what happens? Hamilton throws his support to Thomas Jefferson, his arch rival. Remember, Jefferson is a Democrat. Hamilton is a Federalist. But when he thought about it, Hamilton felt that the infant republic would be better off under Jefferson as opposed to Aaron Burr, because you just couldn't trust Burr and you couldn't trust which way he was coming from. And that was kind of a shock to a lot of folks back then, but that's what happened. He told his Congress people, yo, you guys, you need to stick with Jefferson and do not throw any support to Burr. So basically what happened, everything went the way it was supposed to have gone. Jefferson became the president, the third president. Burr became the vice president. Now, of course, this developed an enmity between Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. And this was one of the things that eventually led to Burr challenging Hamilton to a duel, which unfortunately Hamilton lost his life in that duel. And the vice president, which is Aaron Burr, he had to haul butt out of New Jersey. The whole thing took place right over here across the river. What do you call it now? West New York? Right over there in Jersey. I think it was Weehawken, if I'm not mistaken. And after the duel, Burr, he couldn't go back to New York. He couldn't stay in Jersey because in this part of the country, dueling had been made illegal. So he headed out west. And back in those days, we're talking about Texas, Louisiana, that part of the country. And somehow Burr, he comes up with some kind of idea, and we'll never know the entire story. But what it comes down to, he is suspected of trying to break off a part of the United States and setting up his own kingdom, right? Which back in those days, because you remember we had like an army of about maybe 10 guys, so it was quite possible. And eventually what happened, they put a warrant out on Aaron Burr for suspected of being suspected treason and sedition, and he was brought back to D.C. And the trial for Burr, if I'm not mistaken, that was held in Richmond, Virginia. And you had the first major Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He sat as judge on that case. What was his name? John Marshall. And that was the news. That was the story of the era at that time, right? And he was wined and dined, and he would have to go to jail for a certain amount of time, and then at night he was allowed to go to big parties, or as they called them back then, soirees and what have you. And Jefferson was really ticked off. I mean, he was pissed. Because remember now, Burr is a criminal, possibly a traitor. And somehow Burr fabricated his story so that it came out that, oh, well, I was trying to take a portion of Mexico, or as he said it back in those days, I was trying to take some land from the Dons and add it to the United States. But I would never betray, I would never betray America. I fought in the Revolution, so I would never do such a thing, which of course was BS because we'll never really know. But what got Jefferson ticked off was the fact that one of his cousins, John Marshall, basically it seemed as if he was using Burr to get back at Jefferson because they had some differences of opinion. Remember, Jefferson is a Democrat. Also, John Marshall, our first real Supreme Court justice, was a Federalist. And it's a very interesting story. Take the time to look it up. But we have been in, I would say, similar straits before. The only thing is that this is the first time that we actually have a president or a former president that's the center of all all of this action. Now, quite frankly, I think that the Republican Party, since we're talking about RICO now, that's what the young lady down there in Atlanta, that is the tool that she's using. And she's going to use it to the best of her ability, no matter how much Trump and his MAGA muscleheads racially attack this woman. I mean, the way that they are speaking about the judges, right? I think, two of them are black. The district attorney here, or the state's attorney here in New York, he's black. And that seems to infuriate a lot of these MAGA people, that black people, black Americans, are going to have a hand in judging their would-be hero. And these threats, I am so sick and tired of Trump and his MAGA minions promising death and destruction to the Biden family, to Democrats in general. I mean, who the hell do they think they are? This goes beyond the bounds of free speech. There was a problem. These Republicans, they like to talk about crime. Okay, give you an example. I'm sure you heard of Prohibition. Basically, you couldn't buy booze openly, right? Now, of course, most Americans they bought booze. They just had to resort to speakeasies, rum runners, bootleggers, what have you. Like my mom and dad used to tell me about the bathtub gin, that sort of thing, right? Now, here in New York, you had the bootleggers and the gangsters. Oh, and by the way, the same type of idiots back then that gave us Prohibition, you have a lot of those same type of idiots in the Republican Party now. And see, what they did, you want to talk about organized crime, you can thank the Republican Party. You want to talk about the mafia, organized crime, drug business, thank the Republican Party. Because in 1919, mostly them, because they wanted to get back at Irish, Italians, and Catholics in general, Uh, Also, black folks, because apparently a lot of white people loved our music, loved black music with the jazz and everything. Also, to give back to Jews, right? Because they sponsored, along with the Irish and Italian, they sponsored a lot of what could be called jazz, right? And the Charleston, the Black Bottom. In other words, through black musicians, black and white people were actually meeting in places and having a good time. And, the Irish and Italian bootleggers were supplying the booze, and people were becoming, human, right? And so I guess what they would call themselves, the white nationalists, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant types, who believed in that stuff, it angered them. So they felt that they could get rid of, make a clean sweep of basically getting rid of, or at least keeping us all in our respective places. This way we can slam the door shut on the Italians, the Irish, those Catholic people, and the Jews, right, and the blacks, because they saw it as an attack on their crazy beliefs, which I guess it was. Thank God. So they said, "Well, we'll show them. We'll bring in prohibition so that nobody can get a legal drink." Instead, what happened is the same thing that you have with marijuana, right? Most people, I would say, at least 75% of the American population has smoked herb at one time or another, myself included, because it's bullshit. All right, it was a bullshit law. And that was the same way that people felt about prohibition back in the day. See? And they figured that they could somehow change the direction of American culture by, what's the proper term? Putting an impediment in front of the Catholics, the Jews, and the blacks. That's basically all prohibition was about. And it failed. But what it succeeded in doing, the money that the bootleggers made, right, from prohibition, well, unfortunately, the real criminal elements basically took the money that they made and they invested it in what? In the illegal narcotics game. And that's why, as we get into the 30s, you have some serious organized crime. Republican Protestants, they created it. And we live with the results of their narrow-minded, short-sighted beliefs, right? We live with that to this very day. You also had a situation where you had a guy, what's his name? Arthur Flegenheimer, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Arthur Flegenheimer, otherwise known as Dutch Schultz, right? The Dutchman, as they called him. And you had Lucky Luciano and one or two other people. You had the guy, how could I forget this guy's name? But he's the guy that threw the 1919 World Series. You ever see the movie 8 Men Out? Well, that's about the 1919 World Series, right? Where the Chicago White Sox, angry because their owner, Comiskey, right? That's who the stadium in Chicago is named after. Comiskey Field. He was a cheap bastard, right? And the players were just sick of it, because remember back then, uh, baseball was really the American pastime. And all the ball players, these are working class guys, right? And they figure that, hey, we should be getting paid what we're worth. Kaminsky's going to make a bundle if we win the series. How come we can't get a taste of that? So this gambler, I'll have his name for you next time around, but he got wind of the fact that the ball players were very discontent. He's a gambler, so what he does, basically, he gets word to the players, hey, you throw a few games, there's going to be some money in it for you, right? Just like you find a boxer that's willing to take a dive. Well, that's essentially what happened with the Chicago White Sox team. And they did. The problem is that the gambler, basically, he tried to stiff the ball players because the ball players were like, hey, you promised us X amount of dollars if we threw some of the, certain games. And we did that. Now, where's our money? And the gambler starts running that, well, look, I don't have your money right now because all my money is out in the street on bets, blah, 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 right? So the ball players then decide, okay, well, what we're going to do, we are going to play our full potential. And what was it? I think it was like a 7-game or 8-game series. And the Chicago, they won the series now. They did win the series. But it just, everything appeared to be so damn flaky and so funny that people were really pissed, especially the people that lost on those, certain games that the boys threw, right? So what happens, there's a big investigation. Congress started to get involved because you got to remember, as I said, this is the American pastime, right? So they have a big investigation, and to sit in judgment, they say, okay, baseball has to have a commissioner, right? So they get this guy, a real bigoted ass too, by the way, George Mountain, they call him George Mountain Hill Landis, right? And he became the commissioner of baseball. And they said, okay, because he was a judge. He had been a judge for most of his life. And they said, okay, Judge Landis, we are asking you to be baseball's first commissioner. And in this business about the 1919 World Series, all of the teams have decided to, go along with whatever you decide. And basically, to make a long story short, Judge Landis says, look, I think with the exception of one guy on the White Sox, he threw everybody else out of baseball. He threw the rest of them out of baseball. Somebody like Shoeless Joe Jackson, one of the greatest ball players that ever lived. And he was not, he was not even involved. He didn't take any money, right? Rothstein, that's the guy's name, the gambler, Arnold Rothstein, okay? He didn't take anybody from Rothstein, but he got tarred with the same brush, see? And that's what that movie is. If you can get your hands in that movie, look at it. It's a great movie, 8 Men Out. But the gambler, who cooked up this whole thing, Arnold Rothstein, what he did after the series was over, he got his money, and he took a trip for about 2 years. Okay, he goes over to Europe, right, and waited for the heat to die down. See, and then he comes back. Now, what the hell's it got to do with what we're talking about? Well, follow along. Rothstein, he was like one of these super brainy guys, right? From the time he was a little kid. I mean, he could balance numbers in his head like nobody's business. And he decides to get into the rackets, you know. And what he does, a lot of the famous names, all right, that you hear about, like Lucky Luciano, right, like the Dutchman, and a few other people, he picks them up as they're young guys, teenagers, right, and they're out in the street, hustling, breaking heads and everything, and Rothstein shows him that you can make more money being businesslike than just being a head buster. Luciano, he picks up on this, right? The Dutchman, he liked the money that Rothstein was showing him, how much he could make, but he just couldn't, how should I put it? He couldn't control himself, right? He was always blowing his top. And make a long story short, what happens, there was, after an incident happened, I think this was about 1930 something, about 33 or 32, somewhere around there, like a shootout, gang shootout. See, don't believe the Republicans when they talk about, the crime has never been this terrible and blah, blah, blah. No. That's not true. But this particular incident, a little 5-year-old, I think it was a little 5-year-old Irish kid, was killed, stray bullet. Just like, unfortunately, you have sometimes in the projects, a little child, innocent, and they're at the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's what happened with this little kid. And New York just, people just explode. Oh, this is terrible. We have to stop this violence in the streets. All right? Luciano, he's telling Dutch, said, listen, Rothstein taught you how to be a businessman. You need to start being a businessman instead of just a brutish gangster. You need to learn how to chill, all right? You need to dress decent. You need to talk decent. You need to stop. The first reaction you have to everything is to either put a bullet in the guy's head or take a baseball bat and smash him to pieces. He said, you got to stop doing that. This is a new day. Because remember, Rothstein taught Luciano. And Luciano comes up with the idea, like you talk about the 5 families and the commission. Luciano was the one that started that right here in New York. Dutch never liked sitting still for it because he was greedy as all hell, number one. Number two, he don't like nobody telling him what to do, see? And, it got bad, got real bad. They elect this guy named Tom Dewey. He eventually became governor of New York. And Dewey's thing was, I'm going to clean up the gangsters and the crooked cops, right? And he starts doing it. Dutch Schultz, he's feeling the heat, right? And he's telling Luciano and the other members of the commission, look, I got to do something about Dewey because Dewey's on my ass. And that's true. Dewey was. Why? Because Dutch was loud, right? He was violent like a crazy person. He never put any kind of shade on himself. And, he was like a low hanging fruit for an aspiring politician like Dewey. And Luciano, is trying to basically tell the Dutchman, yo, just be cool. Why don't you take a trip somewhere? you know? And Dutch is like, I'm not taking no freaking trip. I'm going to kill Dewey. Now, see, now we come around to the day, right? Trump and his minions, like they arrested a woman yesterday down in Texas because she was making racial comments and racial threats to the judge in D.C. Now, I'm looking to see what's going to be done about all this because you don't have a right to do that. See, talk about free speech. You don't have a right to threaten the judge or the president or the vice president. And this lady in Texas, she had done this kind of crap before. And so yesterday, they just came by her door. Hello, come with us, please. And she's in the calaboose. I don't know when she's going to get out, but that's the way it's supposed to go. Dutch, and this was about 1934 back then, right? Dutch decides that he wants to kill the district attorney of New York, right? And Luciano was like, oh my God, this guy is off the hook. We can't have this because if he does something like that, see, you're not supposed to kill the district attorney or make threats. The judge, right? Judges, the cops, all that stuff. And really, newspaper people, those are the certain categories of people you don't mess with. You don't make threats, and you don't do any physical harm to these people. Dutch wouldn't listen, right? So Luciano figures, look, we're going to have to take care of this guy ourselves. And that's exactly what they did. Dutch had this favorite restaurant, Chops, something, all right? And he would always go there. That's another thing about Dutch. He was a single-minded kind of guy. He didn't break up. Well, maybe I'll go over here Monday, and I'll go to this other joint Wednesday, and maybe I'll hang out in Newark on Thursday, and then maybe I'll go to Harlem next Friday, right? He never, in other words, you could map Dutch Schultz, right? You knew when he was going to see one of his girlfriends. You knew where he was going to have dinner at. Favorite place over in Jersey. He goes there for dinner, and he has to go to the bathroom. He goes to the bathroom. He goes to the urinal. Two of Luciano's boys, one with a .38, the other one with a shotgun. They catch him in the process of taking care of business and pump some lead into him and leave. Dutch zipped up his pants, made it back to his table in the restaurant, and then just plopped down in the chair, and then his head hit the table, fell on the table, and eventually they, got him to the hospital, where he died about 2 days later. But that's why I say Trump and his followers, they need to be careful. because this business about threatening folks, that's, it's not good for anyone. Okay. Number two, you talk about respect for law and order. This is why the Republican Party is finished for all practical intents and purposes. I think that they're so badly off that, God forbid, even if Trump was to win the election next year, I don't know. I don't know what kind of mess it would be, quite frankly, because the Republican Party has essentially, we have watched them betray everything that they ever stood for. Now, what you have a political party here in the United States. One of the two major parties is now a party of terrorism. Okay? Now, think about that. The Republican Party in the United States, it's a party of terrorists. What else do you call it when you are making public racial threats to judges, to district attorneys, prosecutors? Okay, you cannot do that, right? And then still call yourself the party of law and order. Remember, the Republicans are the ones that talk about, we support the blue. Yet you take the American flag and you beat cops to death with it. How in the hell is that supporting the blue? And, this business about, calling everybody a communist. Read that crap that Trump puts out there. Oh, these fascist, communist, socialist, racist, right, who are after me. Well, in the first place, he's a dummy, because you cannot put communism and socialism on the same center. They're two different things, for God's sake, right? And that line about, if they can get after me, they can get you. No, it has nothing to do with me, Joe Average. It's about you, Donald. Hell, he should be happy, because he always wants it to be about him. Well, now, this is all about him. But he goes out to these predominantly white working class mobs and tells them they're trying to attack you by attacking me. No. And then, you ever watch when they interview the people at one of those Trump things? Well, they've been constantly after Donald. They have been chasing after him. Well, I would happily, gladly tell that person, yeah, because that's what we do to people who, in this country, who are known criminals. Trump is a known criminal. This business about, he doesn't like the military. He doesn't like the intelligence agencies like NSA, National Security Agency, who I've worked with, DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, who I actually worked in, was assigned to for almost 5 years, CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, right, who has their mandate is to basically do everything overseas, okay, counterintelligence. But technically, they can't operate in the United States. That's their mandate. But they are one of our intelligence branches. Well, see, Trump hates us. He hates people like us. And the reason he does is because he knows that we know a lot of the bullshit that he has been up to. That's why all his goings on with Russian oligarchs, those strange banks in Cyprus, okay, and London, all that good stuff. Why? Because of the fact that he ripped off American banks so often, they just they got to the point, hey man, we can't make any loans for you, to you, because you always rip us off. You know, it's just like you got a guy you know in the neighborhood, right? He's always hitting you up. Yeah, let me hold this $200. I'll take care of you. And come time to pay it back. Oh, well, look, I ran into some trouble, blah, blah, blah. Well, that was Trump with the banks. And his nutty oldest sons are the taller of his boys. I can't think of that kid's name. He always just kind of, I'm not talking about the one with the mustache and the beard that is always holding these campaign things for his old man, but the other one. He came right out and admitted, a guy asked him, one of the reporters asked him, where do you get all this money from to open up these different golf courses around the world? And what did the kid say? Oh, well, we get most of our money from the Russians. Come on, man. Now, you want to be president of the United States, and the majority of your funding comes from a nation that, although they may not be our actual enemy at the time, but they are definitely competitors on the world stage. And you want to be president, and then you're going to look askance at the FBI or any of the other intelligence agencies. Why are they looking at Donald? Well, hell, you know, you have all these business under the table going on with Russia and everything. If I'm Mr. Intelligence Agency, and I know I have a person over here that wants to run for president, but he is in bed with a lot of the people that I know don't mean the country any good, I would not be doing my duty if I didn't keep an eye on what he's up to. That's why you have intelligence in the first place. But see, Trump tries to take everything, every damn thing, and say, see, they're picking on me. You know? Let him tell that crap to the people in Atlantic City, New Jersey. You know, he bankrupted the whole damn town, a whole city. This guy bankrupts. And then he pops up and said, oh, well, I'm being persecuted. I mean, come on, man. This guy, to my white fellow citizens, I mean, absolutely no disrespect. Okay? But this guy, white guy, who by the time he was 8 years old was worth over $1 million, okay? This guy talks about him being an unfortunate, persecuted individual. Now, really, does that sound like someone that has been persecuted his entire life? I don't think so. When it came time for him to serve his country, his papa 5 times was able to find doctors that would say that he had some kind of splinter in his foot, and because of that, he could not do his military duty. And this is the guy that feels they've been persecuting me my entire life? I mean, come on. I can't speak, I won't speak on the entire country, but I'd like to know, when are some of us going to finally grow up? Okay? and just admit. Now, you go to some of these Trump rallies, and some of those people will actually come out and tell you, yeah, we like Donald because he's trying to keep the Mexicans out of here. Okay? All right. I mean, to me, I think that that's a barbaric way of looking at things. But at least, be honest. I'm so tired of these people. People feel uncertain. They're worried about. No, 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 no. The majority of those folks that are put it this way, a lot of those folks that are supporting Trump, they're racist. Okay? Racism has a whole hell of a lot to do with it. And we just need to stand up in the bright sunlight and just admit that and go from there. All right? We have a problem in this country. And the problem is racism. Okay? And I know Trump and the Republicans, they play this little cute game. They'll have, what's the name of that kid? A lot of these artists I don't follow anymore. Bow Wow, whatever the hell. The one that Trump gave him a dispensation, basically. And the young lady that, what was she? What's his name? Y or G. She followed. She was his press person or something of that nature. Oh God, what is that boy's name? That's the problem that I have. People that I really don't care for, I have a problem with their name. I think that's because of the fact that subconsciously, I don't particularly care for their message. But I'm primarily talking about Black and Hispanic artists that claim to be Trump followers. I think that is really for a person of an artist of color. I think that's really sad, and I know I'm going to catch it because they're going to say, "Oh, well, Robert just wants all blacks to be on the Democratic plantation." But no, I don't think that because of the fact I criticize rappers like Ice Cube, and what's the other one? Kanye, and folks like that. I don't think that I want any of my people to be on anyone's plantation. But I do believe that as a person of color who, in their family historically, experienced racism, experienced American slavery, I cannot condone these same people who experienced that, and yet you're going to, basically join the Ku Klux Klan with this anti-Semitic nonsense. To me, that shows somewhere a lack of education, and because you don't know their story and you don't know your own story. I mean, you might know your story, uh, what your story is for today, but historically, no. Okay, uh, the idea of death camps, concentration camps, people being thrown into gas ovens. If that doesn't disturb you, I really don't know what to say. But I have made it for me. I cannot you know I cannot get with or support artists, whether they be people of color or any type of people that give the impression that they condone that kind of madness. And while we're on the subject, this time period right now, last week was the 50-year anniversary supposedly of hip hop. I haven't heard anybody say anything about Gil Scott Heron. Okay, uh, I don't think that I would find Brother Gil uh, hanging out with people who are, anti-Semitic. And something I learned a long time ago: the people who are anti-Semitic are generally the same type of people who are anti-black. Okay, uh, it shouldn't be a big secret. I forgot who it was, but some star or celebrity made the comment that I think it might. As a matter of fact, it was Ali. Yeah, Muhammad Ali. He made that comment. I see, you take me to dinner and you wine and dine me, and you're my friend and all this other good stuff, but then you treat the waiter like a slob. Well, you ain't my friend, because I know the same way that you treat that waiter and you feel and think about that waiter, that's the same way you feel about me. See, and I also I'm very leery of people like Bill Maher, because you never know which way this cat's coming from. Because he seems to be relatively friendly with the type of people who seem to publicly show those anti-Semitic feelings. Same with people who, I don't know, they freak out behind trans people. How many trans people we got in America? 10? Yeah, I exaggerate to a point, but that is not like an overwhelming situation, Yet the Republicans and the other bigots in this country, they want you to think that everybody has a transgender person hiding beneath their beds or beneath their kids' beds. And that's just freaking crazy. And I remember the last show that I watched of Bill Maher before I stopped looking at it so much. Excuse me, I really haven't watched a Bill Maher show in months, to be quite frank about it. But the last show where I sat down and I watched the whole thing, I still watch it on occasion just so I can find out who his guests are going to be. But I used to watch the whole thing cover to cover, faithfully, every Friday night. But that last show that I watched like that, it kind of really freaked me out, because basically the way he said it was that, oh well, working class parents, they're just terrified that trans people are going to kidnap their kids, or some crap like that, something to that effect, right? And I said to myself, my God, is he trying to set these people up for a lynching? A lot of trans people are suicidal, and I don't blame them. I can see why. Because the Republican Party, along with Trump, they have managed to try and turn half the country against these poor people. I don't know what their issues are. I'm not trans. I have no idea what their issues are, or what they feel like. I mean, I'll be honest about it was not. It's not a big thing with me because it's not. It doesn't affect me. But I tell you what does affect me is when I see rotten ass bigots try to pick any group of people, no matter how large or small, and use them and try to use them for some kind of whipping bag or whipping boy. And that's all these right wingers, these Republicans. That's all that they look for a way to essentially make someone feel bad about themselves. Number one, and then two, to make American society feel bad towards them. And that's wrong. That is really wrong. Same way that they try to do the LGBT people, right? I'm not gay. Big deal. But I don't want to see people harassed because of their sexuality or beaten. See, one of my problems is I was born and raised here in New York. And I was exposed to a lot of stuff from World War II. Most of the men in my life as a kid, right? Teachers, even when I was in Catholic school, right? Most of the men were veterans from World War II. The youngest ones might have been Korean War vets. But most of the guys, generally, they were World War II veterans, black and white, see? And, I mean, I don't know how many times I've read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, and how many times I have spoken to people who actually lived through the Holocaust in concentration camps. And I had a chance, even though I was Catholic, I attended Jewish services because I also was a member of the Riverside Church, and they had a lot of cultural cross connects. And I sang in the choir at Riverside. I attended the Passover, the suck, all that stuff. And maybe that's why it's real hard for me, damn near impossible to see. Excuse me. Maybe that's why it's so hard for me to see anyone as a monster. Well, that's what all these Republicans are doing. Just like now, what's their latest craze? Attack black legal professionals, and especially to attack black females in any professional position. This whole thing with the vice president, Ms. Harris, right? She wouldn't be getting all this guff if she was not a black woman, right? I don't care who disagrees with that. The woman was, a lawyer, district attorney, right? United States senator. Why isn't she qualified to be vice president? You take a look at what you had in there before Biden. You take a look at Donald Trump. Someday I will get this thing fixed. Okay, there you go. Now, stay dead. But see, this is what really enrages me. And unfortunately, you have black men out there who foolishly follow behind the nonsense. Oh yeah, man, she ain't no good. How do you know she's no good? Well, she did. Who told you she did that? Who told you that she looked for black men to lock up for smoking marijuana? I mean, some of the crazy stuff out here, and people swallow this nonsense. No, you have a black woman that, God forbid anything happened to Joe Biden, but she would be president. And that scares the hell out of a certain segment of this of people in this country. And we have to start facing facts, people. And excuse me. The way this thing just goes off. But as I was saying, we have to start facing facts. And one of those facts are that racism is a key component to the disruption that we see in this country. And they are, like I said, there's a certain segment of people who have to make up their mind. Do you want a democracy, or do you want an oligarchy? Do you want nationalism? Okay, in terms of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant ruling the country, the hell of anyone else. This is the 21st century. And all of us in America have to understand that you can't have this business of, well, these people are cool, but those people, they're not human. They're not as good as us over here on the right side. Can't do that. And keep in mind, you have a rising Africa. I say rising in the sense that thing that's going on right now in Niger. That's an example. Most of the stuff that we need to run a high-tech society in the 21st century comes out of Africa. Uranium, cobalt, all that stuff, gold. And we're at the point now where we're weak when it comes to Africa. I think that what Obama agreed with Hillary Clinton to attack Gaddafi in Libya, I think that was a horrendous mistake, a very bad mistake. You have all these people, not so, I won't say all these people, but you have people in Europe, you talk about immigration. Well, suppose Africa said that, hey, we hear what you're saying. If we got to put them behind a fence, we're going to stop any of our people from trying to get to Europe, Spain or Britain or France or Germany or Austria. But you're not getting one iota of any strategic materials. Huh? That's something to think about. I don't want America. I mean, we've already seen one Vietnam and 20 years in Afghanistan. How would you like to be fighting Muslim insurgents in West Africa for the next 15 years? I don't want to see that happen. But if we don't, in America, if we don't start living up to our principles and learn to deal in a changing world, it could happen. You know, in spite of what Putin thinks or says he thinks, you cannot just nuke everybody you don't like, okay? You can't destroy the planet just to have your way. Okay, it might be heartwarming for some people, but it's not going to solve anything. So I think these are the type of things that we need to think about in this changing world. And I know that there's a segment here in America that are very uncomfortable with the fact that by the time I'm an old geezer, yeah, I know I'm a geezer now. In another 15 years, I'll be an old geezer. But still talking smack, but I will be an old geezer. And by that time, this country's going to look at it. It's looking more different every day. And just think about what it's going to look like in 15 years. we're either going to have to learn how to deal with each other, or we're going to wind up slaughtering each other. And I think most of us that have at least half a brain, we want something better than ethnic slaughter for our children and our grandchildren. Just something to think about. And like I say, you got to be real because the truth, it does matter. Listen, folks, thank you again for allowing me into your home. And, I'll be back next week, same time, same place, same channels. Take care of yourselves, and take care of each other. Bless you. Night.
motion